love to God and consequent love to man, he will meet with God's approval. This is more value than mere knowledge, and this love is far safer guide than any mere intellectual attainment, Paul is saying. And so he says, how he then talks about not only the supremacy of love over knowledge, but he says how this knowledge relates to things offered to idols. Now, he gave a principle. Now he's going to relate to the answer to which they've been asking for. For instance, 4 and 5, he says, knowledge concurs that an idol is nothing, and that there is only one God and one Lord. That's what knowledge tells us in verse 4. As concerning, therefore, the eating the meat of the idols, that are the things that are offered into sacrifice unto idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is none other God but one. We know this concerning, therefore, from this general principle, which it closes in verse number 3. The apostle now proceeds to the real question at hand and repeats this verse in the question that it admits to that all had knowledge. He says the eating of those things which are offered in sacrifice to idols, whether it's right to eat them or not right to eat them. Here's the question. It's varied from that which is question asked in verse 1, but it's essentially the same. The question was whether it was right for Christians to eat the meat of animals that had been sacrificed to idols. For he says, we know, we Corinthians know, and Paul seems to fully admit that they all had the knowledge which they claim. We know that an idol is nothing. It is not the true God. It is not a proper object of worship. We are not so stupid as to suppose that a block of wood or a carved image or a chiseled marble is a real intelligence and is conscious or capable of receiving worship or benefiting its worshipers. We fully admit that. We know the whole thing is misleading, and there could be no danger that we're partaking food offered to sacrifice them. We should ever be brought into belief that they are that they are alive and able to help people. Again, what a stupid falsehood that the objects of worship is, to deny the true God. There is no doubt that the mere intelligent pagan had this knowledge, and doubtless merely all, a few had been educated in the grosser views of paganism, might still regard it an idol as with a superstitious reverence. For whatever might have been the knowledge of statesmen and philosophers on the subject, it's still doubtless true that the great mass of pagans would in the world did regard the dumb idols as proper objects of worship and suppose that they inhabited some invisible spirit or the gods for purposes of state and policy and imposition. The lawgivers and the priests of the pagan world were careful to cherish this delusion, and so they did. But we know that the idol is nothing. It is delusive. It is imaginary. There may have been reference here to some of the old an idol of the Hebrews, for they called their idols Eliam or Elil in the singular, meaning vain, null, nothing, void, nothingness, vanity, weakness, etc., indicating that their vanity and powerlessness. And you have so many Old Testament references to that. But he says, we know that the idol is nothing, nothing in the world, nothing at all. It has no power over the world, no real existence anywhere. There are no such gods as the pagan pretend to worship. There is but one God, and the fact is that is known of us all. The phrase in the world seems to be added by the Holy Spirit for emphasis here to show the utter nothingness of idols, to explain the most emphatic manner that the belief that they had no real existence. He says, and that there is none other God but one. This is the great cardinal truth of our faith. To keep this great truth in mind was the grand object of the Jewish economy, and this was so plain and important that the Christians at Corinth supposed that it must be admitted by all, even though they should partake of the meat that was offered to sacrifice to idols, yet they supposed it not possible that any of them could forget this great cardinal truth that there is but one God. Verse number 5, for though there be that are called gods, whether in heaven or in earth, as many gods, lords many, he says, for though there be many that are called gods, gods so called. The pagans everywhere worshiped multitudes and gave them the names of gods, whether in heaven, residing in heaven, as part of the gods were supposed to do. Many of their gods supposed to reside in heaven, and though they were supposed occasionally to visit the earth, such as Jupiter, Juno, Mercury, etc., or in the earth, upon the earth, that reign particularly over the earth or the sea, such as Neptune. The ancient pagans worshiped some gods that were supposed to dwell in heaven. Others are supposed to reside on earth, and others that resided over the inferior regions, such as Pluto, etc. And he says, and as there be many gods, again, that as there are, in fact, many which are called or so called or regarded as gods, it is the fact that pagan worship many who they esteemed to be gods or whom they regarded as such. This is not admission that that there truly were gods, but they were supposed as and worshipped as gods by others. The pagans, they had many gods, people that and entities that they did worship. He says, and lords many. The Greek here is kurioploi, those that had the rule over them, to whom they submitted themselves. Lord is the idea of that which one submits to, whose laws they obeyed. The name Lord was often given to their idol gods. Thus among the Gentiles,